All right, well, we've reached a milestone on Doodling with Purpose. We've now been through all of the verb tenses, and so this week we're going to do a review. But beforehand, let's take a look at the homework last night that was related to the future tense. So the last tense that we hit because it's a little bit harder to recognize and has extra elements. So we talked about how future tense only doubling verbs really stand out. Everything else, that's kind of your only clue. But you do have the three future tense elements: hailing the visitor, the offering request, and the appeal of goodwill. So I've written all of those out as your homework for last week, and hopefully you have glyphed it, written it out, and now let's translate and transliterate it. Well, transliterate it first. All right, so we have the Egyptian sounds with all of the sound complements worked out, and then we can start translating it. So, as we talked about, the beginning of the first element for future is hailing the visitor. So we have "O the living," and then "upon," noting that the difference in the man determinative, whether he's pointing to his mouth or pointing outwards. Now we have the earth or land, which is "ta." That's the sort of oval with the three dots. That's a road with sand, is what you're drawing out there. All right, now we have the verb for to say and the pronoun plural you, the dependent pronoun. So you say, then the number 1000, which is the lotus leaf, which is pronounced ha. And usually in the, well, the items to bring, you're getting just the determinative, but I've spelled it out here. So opid, birds, instead of just having a bird determinative, in order just to jog your memory on some vocabulary. And then again, we have another lotus leaf, 1000 mirrors, a vocabulary word we did quite a bit ago. And then 1000 cats, mew, the word for cat, one of the cutest Egyptian words. And then we have the goodwill for those who love life and those who hate death as a phrase. And remembering that both of those are in the participle form because you see double consonant, which happens in that form, which is what we're actually going to review right now to help recognize and understand different verbs when we see them in paragraph form. All right, so here are all of our tenses, and I've made an absolute mess out of this piece of paper, so we're going to do a simplified version as we go through each tense in review. Remembering also that there are 4 types of verbs. This has nothing to do with the tense. Strong verbs, doubling verbs, weak verbs, and extra weak. And each type of verb modifies in a different way for each tense. Some don't modify at all. All right, so first we'll look at the infinitive, which would be to hear, to see, to love, to give. The only clue we have here is that there's an extra T added for weak and extra weak. So there's our clue. We're going to make a master clue sheet. So the infinitive form, your clue is weak and extra weak verbs end in a T, the loaf. All right? Next up, we have present tense verbs. So hears, sees, loves, gives. All right, and our clues here are that we're going to add the pronoun or noun afterwards. Otherwise, there's no change. So that does make present tense and things like future tense a little hard to differentiate, but it also makes present tense, I guess, more dominant. All right, specific present. That's where you're adding an is to the verb. Is hearing, is seeing, is loving, is giving. All right, and our key to understanding the infinitive is the adding of her with a stroke line to the beginning, and then to the end, adding a T to weak and extra weak, which is similar to the infinitive. All right, past tense verbs. So past tense, you remember, has a very specific sign that tells you you're going into the past. It's the IW, you. This isn't really pronounced. It's just, again, it's indicating that someone in the past did something. And your past formula is basically having that in the beginning, you are a verb, and then we have N, which is like the ED, and a pronoun. So there is your past verb tense clue. Adding the stop sign U before the sentence, and then adding N for ED and the pronoun to the end, and double verbs, double. All right, in the future tense, Again, we've talked about how this is very similar to the present tense, and only doubling verbs really give you your clue, and that's why we have the handy-dandy future tense elements, which we went over in our homework last week and at the beginning of this video, so you should be quite familiar with them at this point. So that's your clue for future tense. Add the pronoun and noun to the end. Doubling verbs don't double. Extra we lose the R if it starts with R. That's a fun little modification that pops up in a couple different tenses. All right. Also remember, future tense has those elements. I underlined there in green at the end, so that's your other clue. All right, participle, our fun participle where the verb acts as a noun. One who hears, one who sees, one who loves, one who gives. In this one, everything doubles except strong verbs. If it's an extra week and it starts in R, you drop that R, just like in the future tense. So the participle main tense, very similar to future tense and also very similar to the past participle, especially because the strong doesn't change. So in the past participle, nothing doubles, whereas everything doubles in the regular. So it means that strong verbs look no different in the past or the present, so you have to work that out with the paragraph. All right, so past participle, nothing doubles. Keep the R in extra week. It's the verb as noun, and there's no difference. All right, the relative form. So this is the Egyptian version of what or that added to the verb because they don't have words for what or that. So we're going to modify the reading of the verb to include that as part of the structure. All right, so relative forms, your clue is everything doubles except strong. Add a T and a pronoun to the end. And there's your relative form, your present relative. You can also have a past relative form. And this one's actually pretty easy to spot because we know regular past has that water sign for ed. So in this case, we're just going to, after the verb, add a T, add an N, and add a pronoun or noun. And there's your clue that you are in the past relative form. And then lastly, we have future relative, which is known as the sidim T form. And this is basically where you've got your T, your pronoun, and then your Y, your I sound with the double horizontal stroke lines. So after the verb, add T, add the noun pronoun, finish it with a double set of two angled stroke lines, which is pronounced like a Y or an I. And this is your homework for this week, is to copy that out and have all of your verb tenses in front of you. All right, good luck with that. Hopefully verbs are firmly established, and we're going to move on to pronouns next week and work through those. Thanks so much for watching and being part of the class. We couldn't have it without you. Really glad that you're here today. Thanks for doodling with purpose, and I'll see you next week for more fun on YouTube. See you then.